Okay, welcome back to my class. Actually, we are discussing government budget. In the previous classes, we have already discussed the meaning, objectives, and components of the government budget. Today, we'll discuss classification of receipts. Receipt means we'll discuss what are the various sources of the money received of the government during a fiscal year. So government receipts are classified into two categories. One is revenue receipt, another one is capital receipt. We'll discuss one by one. Let us see what is the meaning of revenue receipt. Revenue receipt are those estimated receipt of the government during the fiscal year which do not affect asset or liability status of the government. It means these receipts do not create corresponding liability for the government. It means the revenue receipt do not create any corresponding liabilities to the government. It means the money received by the government in the form of revenue receipts are not to be returned back by the government. It means government is not liable to return back the money received in the form of revenue receipt. Do not lead to reduction in the asset of the government. Let us see, it will also not reduce the asset of the government. You take the example, suppose if the government has borrowed the money from the Reserve Bank or from the stock exchange market or from the foreign countries, certainly that money is to be returned back into the future. So repayment of the loan will reduce the asset of the government. But let us see, the money received in the form of fees, money received in the form of fines, money received in the form of grants in aid, this money will not reduce the asset of the governments. Let us see, these revenue receipts are further classified into two categories. One is tax revenue, another one is non-tax revenues. It means this revenue receipt consists of tax revenue and non-tax revenues. Let us see what is the tax revenue. A tax is the compulsory payments made by people and companies to the government without any corresponding in return. They are imposed on income and property of people or companies. Let us see, you are knowing a tax is a compulsory payment made by people and companies to the government without any corresponding in return, and they are imposed on income and property of people or companies. It means taxes are a compulsory payments and which are made by the people, which are made by the citizens of a country, which are made by the companies of a country. And these tax revenues are further classified into direct taxes and indirect taxes. So tax revenues are further classified into two categories. One is direct taxes, another one is indirect taxes. Let us see what is the meaning of direct tax. Direct taxes refer to taxes that are imposed on property and income of the individuals and companies and are paid directly by them to the government. Let us see, direct taxes are those taxes which are imposed on property and income of individuals and companies and are paid directly by them to the government. It means direct taxes are the taxes, let us see, which cannot be shifted. Let us see, the liability to pay the tax and the impact of the tax lies on one person. It means direct taxes are the taxes which cannot be shifted from one person to another person, which can be paid by the person to whom it is levied, the person to whom it is imposed, and direct taxes are imposed on the income and property of the people or the companies. Let us see these examples. What are the examples of direct taxes? Direct taxes are income tax, corporation tax, interest tax, death duty, capital gain tax. These are some of the examples of the direct taxes. So next one is indirect taxes. Indirect taxes are those taxes which are paid to the government by one person, but their burden is borne by another person. They are imposed on goods and services. It means indirect taxes are the taxes which can be shifted. The burden of the taxes can be shifted to another person, such as, let us see, this indirect taxes, the taxes which are inclusive with the price of the commodity. Whenever we are buying the goods and services, the consumer, we are paying the taxes, but we are not paying that tax directly to the government. We are paying the taxes either to the seller or to the producers, but that producers, they have to pay the taxes to the government. So indirect taxes are the taxes which are imposed on the goods and services. Nowadays, let us see, we have only one indirect tax, that is GST, goods and services tax. But previously, so many taxes were there, that they were the indirect taxes, such as sale tax, such as value-added tax, such as service tax, such as entertainment tax, such as different custom duties. So different excise duty, different taxes were there. But nowadays there is only one indirect tax, and that is goods and services tax, that is GST. GST is the tax imposed on the goods and services. The second, second sources of the revenue receipt is non-tax revenue. Let us see non-tax revenue. Non-tax revenue refers to the receipt of the government from all sources other than those of tax receipt. It means apart from tax receipt, there are so many other sources of the government that comes under the non-tax revenue. These revenues are also not to be returned back by the government. So let us see, first one is the interest. You are knowing the government, union government, central government used to give the loan to the state government and union territories as well as to the corporate sectors, and that in return of the loan, government used to receive the interest, and that interest becomes the sources of the income of the government. Another one is profits and dividends. You are knowing government companies are there, government public sector undertakings are there, different public sector undertakings are there, and they are producing the goods and services, they are selling into the market, and they are earning the profits, and that profits becomes the sources of the income of the government. Apart from this, dividends, government has made the investment into the stock exchange market, and government is earning the dividends. That dividends are also the sources of the revenue of the government. Then fees, let us see here, fees, I have written different types of the fees. The government used to provide different types of the services, and in order to provide the services, government used to receive the fees, such as, let us see, we can say tuition fee, such as the registration, land registration fee, or such as, let us see, different other fees are being collected by the government. License fee, you are knowing the different licenses. Government used to give the license, such as the driving license fees, such as, let us say, other permits also. Government used to provide the national permits. So in order to provide the national, international permits, government used to collect the fees, and that fees becomes the non-tax revenue of the government. Fines and penalties. Government fines and penalties. If somebody, if the citizen of a country, they abolished or they avoid the rules and regulation, then that time, let us see, fines and penalties can be levied by the government, imposed by the government agencies, and that becomes the sources of the revenue of the government. Gifts and grants. Gifts, you are knowing that we are getting the gifts from the foreign countries, that we are getting grants in aid from the foreign countries, from the international agencies, financial institution. So gifts and grants also become the non-tax revenues. Here, estate is also there. Estate, sometime it happens, then some people, they die without leaving any will to their family, and that, let us say, that property or the income becomes the income of the government. So these are the different sources. So next one is capital receipt. So capital receipts are those estimated receipts of the government during the fiscal year which affect asset or liability status of the government. These receipts create corresponding liability for the government, such as borrowing. It means capital receipts are the receipts which create corresponding liability for the government. Corresponding liability to the government means government is liable to return back the amount of money received in the form of capital receipts, such as borrowings. If suppose government has borrowed the money, then that money is to be returned back. It is the liability of the government that the borrowings are to be returned back into the futures. And it lead to reduction in asset of the government, such as, let us see, disinvestment, recovery of loans. These are, it means when the capital received, this capital received lead to the reduction in the asset of the government. Disinvestment, you are knowing, is a process in which the share of the companies, the equities of the companies are sold to the private sector. It means it is the reduction into the asset of the government. So let us see this classification of capital receipt. Capital receipts are classified into three categories. First one is borrowings. Second one is recovery of loans. Third one is other receipts. Other receipts such as disinvestment, such as a small savings, etc. Let us see the first one. The first sources of the capital receipt is the borrowings. Borrowings are the funds raised by the government to meet excess expenditure. So government borrow funds from. So let us see what happened. Sometimes government expenditures are more than the government receipts. So that time what happened, that government used to borrow the funds from the market. So let us see what are the different sources from where the government can borrow the funds. First one is open market. It means government can borrow the funds from the public. From the public, government can borrow. Government can borrow from the commercial bank, from the stock exchange market. Then government also can borrow the funds from the Reserve Bank of India. Reserve Bank of India also used to grant loans and funds to the union government, to the state governments. Then foreign governments. Suppose if we are having the good relation with USA or some other countries, then we can borrow the funds from that foreign countries. So borrowings are also made from the foreign countries. International institutions. There are so many international financial institutions, such as, let us see, this World Bank is there, International Monetary Funds are there, Asian Development Banks are there, so many other financial institutions are there from where we can borrow the funds, or the government can borrow the funds. But these borrowings all are the capital receipt. Capital receipt are the receipt which is to be returned back. The money, the amount of money, the amount of loan received by the government is to be returned back in future along with the rate of interest. Second one is recovery of loans. You are knowing government grants various loans to a state government or union territories. And recovery of such loan is a capital receipt. So government has already given loans to the state government, to the union territories, and that loans are to be recovered by the government. And recovery of loan becomes the sources of the capital receipt of the government. Other receipt. Let us see what are the other receipt of the government. Other receipts are disinvestment. Disinvestment is a process through which the government equities, government shares are sold. Either some part of the share or some whole of the shares are sold to the private sector. So when government is selling the shares of the government companies, public undertakings to the private sectors, government used to receive the fund, and that funds becomes the capital receipts. It means disinvestment is the process through which the asset of the governments are reduced. So asset of the governments are reduced when government used to sell the equities or the asset of the government to the private sector. Another one is a small savings. A small savings, let us say, this government, you are knowing, government post offices are there. Government post office used to raise the funds into the form of post office deposits. So all the post offices are used to accept the deposits in the form of bank. They have the, just like one means postal deposits. So in the form of postal deposit or in the form of different other deposits are there. Suppose monthly income schemes are also there, and national savings certificate schemes are there. Kisan Vikas Patra is there. So in all these schemes, government used to collect the funds from the market, from the public, and these becomes the sources of the capital receipt. So let us see what is the capital receipt. Capital receipts are those estimated receipts of the government during the fiscal year which affect asset or liability status of the government. I think the concept of the revenue receipt and the concept of the capital receipts are clear to all of you. Okay, thank you.